Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us at today's Blackboard Collaborate Storage webinar. My name is Emma Thompson-Chesters, and I am going to be moderating today's session. Before we do begin, I just want to go over a couple of housekeeping rules. By default, everybody is muted, so if you do have any questions or comments as we're going through today's session, please post them in the chat, and then myself or any of my colleagues will be able to pass these on, and hopefully we'll get these answered for you. With regards to today's recording, it will automatically be sent out to you in the next 48 hours. We are also going to make it available on the Blackboard community, along with the slides, so you'll be able to access those at a later date. Also, today's webinar, we do have closed captioning enabled. When you logged in, you will have seen the option to enable it, a bar at the top of the screen. To do so afterwards, you can click on the purple icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That's going to open the panel. You then go to the cog icon. That takes you to My Settings. And then underneath Audio and Video Settings, you'll see that there is a tick box to display closed captions, and you can just enable it there. But without further ado, I'm going to pass you over to today's speaker, Edgar Gonzalez. Thank you, Edgar.
Thank you, Emma, and welcome everybody. My name is Edgar Gonzalez. I am a Senior Client Experience Manager with Blackboard. I am happy to be here today to share with you relevant information about Blackboard Collaborate and more specifically about storage management and best practices around storage and even supporting your users as well. So for today's session, our goals are going to be straightforward. We will first cover storage in Collaborate, provide you with an overview on how the storage is organized. Then I will share with you some tools and resources available for you to better manage that storage within Collaborate. I will also share some best practices and recommendations, not just in the context of storage, but also in the context of supporting your users that will impact your storage as well. And then towards the end of the presentation, I will share some information about the Collaborate original experience and the end of life. So sharing some resources if your institution at some point in the past was leveraging this particular user experience for Collaborate and how you can transition into the new Ultra experience. So if you attended our SaaS storage webinar a few months back for Blackboard Learn, what I'm about to share right now about Blackboard Collaborate storage may sound familiar. Your Blackboard Collaborate storage is designed with specific characteristics and requirements that differ from your regular consumer storage. And this is what allows us to leverage advanced storage technology and utilities to offer you with redundancy, high availability, persistence, and even security, the security that it's necessary to ensure all your Collaborate recordings always remain safe and available regardless of the size of your institution, regardless of in some instances, regardless of whatever the technology circumstances of your users as well. And I'll share with you some details around that later in this presentation. So now, as a general statement, I can share with you that Collaborate storage entitlements start at around 500 gigabytes for your institution, but each organization, each institution is different. So for instance, you may have an enterprise license of Collaborate that will provide you with a minimum storage that is beyond those 500 gigabytes that I just made reference. Just in case, just as it is in the same case with Learn though, your institution can license additional storage based on your needs. And actually today's presentation is focused on storage management, but not necessarily on storage licensing. So if you have any questions about your license, about your entitlements, about even the minutes of usage, which is another one of those elements that we factor in as part of your licensing, I encourage you to reach out to your account team. They will be able to provide you details, with details around these questions related to the allotments, licensing, and all of those details. So today's conversation is about storage, but about storage management and about storage best practices. So I just wanted to get that one out of the way just to give you a little bit of context about storage. Okay, so we just reviewed at a high level the licensing entitlements for Collaborate, but now this slide in here sort of helps me illustrate what Collaborate elements are part of your overall Collaborate storage. And most importantly, this slide helps us identify what elements are part of that the footprint that counts towards those licensing allotments that I just mentioned in our previous slide. Blackboard Collaborate storage is comprised of several components. The first one and the most obvious one are the MP4 files generated when a session is recorded. This is the only file or data that will count towards those values that I defined earlier in the presentation, in the previous slide, or those licensing allotments that are set in your agreement, okay? So only those MP4 recordings. But it is also important to know that there are other elements that are stored to support these MP4 recordings. For instance, we have raw segment files or MCU segments that contain data files from which recordings can be regenerated in case of any technical issues or different quality outputs. So this gives us, meaning Blackboard and you, the ability to offer optimized recordings, even in low bandwidth circumstances. So if a user has low quality bandwidth at the local coffee shop, for instance, the student may still have access to a quality playback recording because we have these supporting files under the hood, if you will, or underwater as these visual illustrate. So we also have additional AWS files because after all, your Blackboard Collaborate infrastructure solution technology leverage AWS technology. And as I mentioned a couple of slides ago, in the context of storage, this AWS technology facilitates those specific technical requirements to secure and preserve all of these segments, the recordings that have been marked for deletion, even the files that instructors or moderators may upload to their synchronous session to share with students, all of those files are stored as well. And even the reports that are generated, such as the recording report, session reports, and all of that reporting. So, by the way, we will be reviewing these reports later in the session, but again, I just wanted to take just a few moments to illustrate, one, the MP4 recordings that are the ones that count towards that storage footprint, but all the supporting files that are associated with these recordings to, again, ensure that you, your users, your faculty, your students have access to quality recordings, but also having the opportunity to participate in course activities or any other synchronous sessions that you may be facilitating. Now, I just highlighted the MP4 recording, but how do they really affect your institution's storage? And the answer is that your Blackboard Collaborate storage footprint is determined by the number of sessions recorded and the size of those recordings. Now, the size of each individual recording will vary according to the duration of the session and the activity within that session. So for instance, a Collaborate session that is being recorded, are class group members having an audio conversation only, or maybe an instructor is sharing her own screen as a tutorial on setting up a spreadsheet through the recording, or maybe the session is more than 2 hours long with 50 students using their cameras having a lively discussion, or maybe it's just a 30-minute session of collaborative whiteboarding and using polls to measure an understanding, to measure the understanding of specific concepts. So in other words, or in short, there is no easy way to determine the storage footprint that an individual recording will require. However, we have found that a general approximation, and I want to emphasize this, a general approximation, is to anticipate that 3.5 hours of recordings will use approximately 1 gig of storage. So just try to keep this, again, as a general approximation, that 3.5 hours will translate into 1 gig of storage, going back to those licensing allotments that you may have in place. So just as is the case with Learn, institutions can manage their storage by purging unneeded recordings, and if needed, you can always download an MP4 file or an MP4 recording and retain that file elsewhere. So when you or your users delete a recording, that recording is no longer part of the storage footprint. Very straightforward. The minute that you mark a recording for deletion, that no longer counts towards that storage footprint. Now, a little bit of a side note in here, if a recording is deleted by accident, it can be recovered for you within 30 days from when that recording was marked for deletion. So you should open a support ticket as soon as possible if you're ever in a situation where you accidentally deleted a recording. So just sharing that as an FYI. All right, so let's spend some time reviewing some of the tools and resources that will help you manage your Collaborate storage. So let's first make sure that we are aware of the Blackboard Collaborate scheduler. If your institution strictly uses Collaborate through the integration with your LMS, your users may never or need to access this interface. But for you or for the team managing Collaborate at your organization, at your institution, the scheduler is the direct way to manage and access Blackboard Collaborate at your institution. This scheduler is also known as the Session Administration System, or SAS with one A. But for now, and just to avoid any confusion with our SAS deployment, let's just make reference to the scheduler, okay? So, and again, this is the browser-based interface for overall administration in reporting, So the overall administration and reporting for Blackboard Collaborate. Now, through this scheduler, you can register users, create and schedule sessions, invite guest speakers to those sessions that you created, access recorded sessions, and even have the opportunity to generate usage reports. So this scheduler exists outside Blackboard Learn or any other LMS. And again, this is the one tool that you have for that team, for those roles at your institution that support Blackboard Collaborate, not just through the learning management system, but also outside the learning management system. So let me share this link in here in the chat, just as an additional resource where you can learn more about our scheduler. Now, within the scheduler, there are 3 user roles that you can leverage to manage your Blackboard Collaborate login group. Now, when I say login group, I am talking about the unique identifier for your institution in the context of Blackboard Collaborate. So think of it as your SSID for your institution, that unique group where all your users, where all your integrations are associated with. The 3 roles available within the scheduler are the manager role, the administrator role, and the supervisor role. Each login group can have only one manager account. And you cannot create any more manager accounts, by the way. There's only one. So a manager account has the highest level of permission within the Blackboard Collaborate scheduler. And this manager role can create, edit, and disable administrator users or supervisor users. The manager is the only account with access to run reports for the entire login group. So if you want to get some reports, the reports that I will be reviewing with you a little bit later in this presentation, you have to access these reports through the manager role. Now, while the UI shows links for sessions and recordings, the manager account cannot create sessions, and therefore, the links for recordings and sessions remain empty. And I know this can be a little bit confusing. So if you are expecting to view sessions and recordings when you log in as the manager, those links actually will take you nowhere. And that's the main reason behind me sharing these icons in here, because when you log in as a manager, these sessions and recordings links, even though they show there, and I know it's a little bit confusing, when you click into any of these 2 links, you will see nothing, okay? So just as an FYI. Now, briefly, just to touch on the administrator and the supervisor role, the administrator can create, edit, and disable supervisor users. And actually, this is the only functional difference between an administrator and a supervisor. The administrator also can automatically create sessions, not automatically, I'm sorry, but he or she can create sessions, delete these sessions, delete any recordings that pertain to these sessions that the administrator created, and the same can be said for the supervisor role. So again, the administrator and supervisor role, very similar, except that the administrator has the opportunity to create users for the supervisor role. All right, so I mentioned that the manager could run several reports. So let's spend some time reviewing these reports. Before I actually start diving deep into each one of these, let me post this link in the chat that I think is going to be helpful for you as you go about becoming more familiar with the different reports. Now, these reports available under the manager role are the session attendance reports, attendance report, metric report, and recording report. Now, let's start first with the report that you may be more familiar with. This is the session attendance report. The session attendance report provides an overview of attendees who join a session. And you can use these for attendance purposes. So, for instance, what time they joined the session, what time they left the session, and how long each one of these attendees was in the session. So managers can view session attendance reports for all sessions. Moderators can view session attendance reports for only their own sessions. So again, going back to the different roles, manager can view attendance reports for everybody. Administrator only can see attendance reports for those sessions that were created under his or her purview, and the same can be said for supervisors. Also, in the context of the learning management system integrations, the session report can be viewed by the instructor or the moderator of that session as well. So just something for you to keep in mind. Now, there are other reports that will help you get a better understanding on how you and your Blackboard collaborating environment is being used. These are very important reports, and you may not necessarily be familiar with these reports and how they may assist in managing your Blackboard Collaborate storage. So let's just spend a little bit of time with this report. So let me also post this link in the chat related to reports. So first, we have the metric report. This is the report that gives you a summary of frequency and scale your institution is using Collaborate so that you can identify trends and make informed decisions about this particular service at your institution. So this gives you a good snapshot on the level of adoption, the usage, how your faculty, how your students are using this at your institution. Then we also have the attendance report that gives you an overview of all sessions and session attendees details beyond what is in the session attendance report, the one that I just reviewed in the previous slide. This may include the time the session was open, the time the session was closed, each attendee's join time, and their leave time as well. Now, we have also the recording report. This report provides you, the managers, or provides the manager role with data about your institution's recordings. This data includes the recording name, a link to the recording, recording creation date and time, and the total duration of the recording. So, speaking of recording reports, or the recording report, let's spend a little bit more time on the recording report because this will be a very useful report when you take action on maintenance activities such as identifying recordings for deletion. This report will give you the opportunity to check which recordings are viewed, downloaded, the number of times the recording was viewed, the date the recording was last viewed, the number of times the recording was downloaded, the date the recording was last downloaded, and we recently updated this report to give you additional information that contains the size of each recording. And that's what this particular visual on the slide is aiming to illustrate. So again, this storage usage in gigabytes, this is the column where you can identify those recordings that perhaps you want to consider not necessarily for deletion if they're being used, but maybe converting that to a different format if you have a digital media platform to better manage these resources. Something important to know about the recording report is that it can only be run in increments of 6 months. But it isn't limited to just the past 6 months. So for instance, you can run a report for January to June of 2020. And if it is for a period more than 6 months, you may need to run 2 reports. So later this year, by the way, we will be making enhancements to this reporting interface to give you the opportunity to run this report using a longer than 6 month date range, okay? So just something for you to keep in mind. Now, staying with the recording report in here, there are 2 additional columns that may provide you with important information if you're integrating Collaborate with your learning management system. These columns are the context name and the context identifier. So for those of you using Blackboard Learn as your learning management system, these are the columns that will give you the course information to track the recordings through the learning management system, such as the course name and the course ID. If you're using a different LMS and you're integrating Collaborate with your LMS, the information in these columns may be called something different, but you still have the opportunity to track the source course for the recordings if your LMS allows these fields to be populated, okay? So it takes 2 for these fields to be populated. So check if your LMS is leveraging these particular data. In the context of LMS integration, there is also an additional column within the recording report where you can see who the session owner is. And in that column, you will be able to identify those sessions that were created, or those recordings rather, that were created through the integration account, meaning that they were created through the learning management system. So hopefully with these details about the recording report, not just what I'm sharing in this slide in here, which is the context name, the context identifier, even the session owner, and also with the additional columns that I share in my previous slide, hopefully you can cross-reference all this information to identify those recordings that are good candidates to be deleted and therefore clear up some of your space for future recordings as well. So again, this particular report, the recording report, a very powerful report for you to manage your storage efficiently for Blackboard Collaborate. In addition to the recording report that you can run in the Collaborate scheduler, we want to empower you also with additional information. So we are also sending you a monthly Power BI report that offers you a snapshot of your storage. The report looks something similar to this screenshot that I'm sharing. And if you are familiar with this report, or rather, actually, let me rephrase that. If this particular report does not necessarily look familiar, or if you have not received this report, I strongly encourage you to contact your account executive or your account team from Blackboard to get a hold of this report. Also, as a side note, we will be enhancing our reporting in Collaborate storage utilization. So we are expecting to have something like this, a report later this calendar year as part of the built-in reporting in Blackboard Collaborate. All right, so now that we have covered the scheduler, the roles, and the different reports available, including the recording report, let's shift the focus or the conversation from reporting to actually taking action. So we will focus on how to delete recordings in the next few slides. The most common and effective way to manage recordings, not just to delete, but also to download these recordings, is through the workflow available within the learning management system. Notice that I say the most effective way because the instructor who creates this recording and is the individual who is more familiar with the intellectual property, he or she has a better understanding on the value of those particular recordings, right? Again, that's what I mean by this being the most effective workflow on how you can manage that storage. And by the way, this is the main driver behind this workflow, the subject matter expert who creates this intellectual property and therefore determines if the recording is still needed or not. It is the best way to determine whether or not a recording should be kept or a recording should be deleted. The screenshot in here aims to illustrate the workflow available through Blackboard Learn. So in your learning management system, if you're using something else, it may look a little bit different, but along the same lines also, and if your institution is using Blackboard Learn, I also want to make you aware that you, as the team supporting not just Collaborate, but also supporting the learning management system, you also have the opportunity to delete recordings and even sessions if you leverage the quick enroll functionality that it's available within Blackboard Learn. So something for you to keep in mind as well. So not just the instructor, but also if as part of your support processes, as part of your business workflows, if the faculty member gives you the okay, so to speak, or as part of those support mechanisms, you have the opportunity to log in into these courses and do a quick enroll. You will have also the opportunity to delete these recordings as well. Now, when deleting Blackboard Collaborate recordings through the scheduler, make sure that you are deleting these recordings using the appropriate user role. And this should be either the administrator role or the supervisor role. Remember, I mentioned earlier that the manager role does not have the option to create sessions, and therefore, the manager role does not have the opportunity to delete recordings that were created through any sessions, right? Because there's no sessions. So the admin role and supervisor role have the capability to give you the access to delete recordings. I also want to emphasize that the deleted recordings, just like I mentioned earlier, don't count against your storage quota. And if for whatever reason you accidentally delete the wrong recording, you have 30 days from when the recording was marked for deletion to recover that MP4 file. So again, you need to work with our support team, and once you realize that you accidentally deleted a recording, I encourage you to open a support ticket as soon as possible. Now, in the context of deletion, and more specifically about bulk deletion, if you need to delete a significant number of recordings, as a Blackboard Collaborate administrator, you can open a support case in our Behind the Blackboard portal to request bulk deletion of Collaborate recordings in order to free up some storage. Let me share this article that it's available to provide you with some additional information related to this, because when opening the support ticket, please limit your requests to recordings contained within a single date range, okay? So for example, delete all recordings before the 1st of September of 2020. Any request to delete from specific courses or created by specific instructors or created within specific user accounts or with multiple date ranges, or requests containing a list of recordings, unfortunately, our support team will not be able to assist you. There's too many moving parts, and again, going back to what I mentioned earlier about the intellectual property, we don't want to find ourselves deleting your intellectual property just based on a technicality, if you will. So again, hence the information, and I just share that knowledge base article to make sure that both you and our support team are on the same page to make sure that all the deletion of accounts, of recordings, is done in a way that is going to be sensible and effective, and we will not find ourselves removing intellectual property that your instructors, that your students still need. All right, so just like, by the way, just like I share with you that we will be enhancing our reporting, we will also be enhancing some of our workflows later this calendar year, where you will have the opportunity to mark recordings for deletion or for transfer by leveraging the recording report. But in the meantime, I want to share some resources available from the community of Blackboard Collaborate users who are leveraging our Blackboard Collaborate APIs to help everybody do a better job in managing your storage. So one of the benefits of the Blackboard Collaborate API is that a technically oriented admin can create a script to delete recordings in bulk. And the one that I'm aiming to illustrate in here is from one of our champions, Heather Kreitz from Columbus State Community College. She put together a set of scripts that will help you delete your recordings. So I will be sharing all of these links in a slide, but for convenience purposes, I'm posting the link to this particular resource in the chat. So again, different ways on how you can act on managing your storage, deleting your storage, and in this case specifically, leveraging the Collaborate API to delete recordings. So again, other resources, just like I mentioned in my previous slide, here are other additional resources that you can leverage to better manage that storage, not just deleting, but also in the context of downloading or transferring Blackboard Collaborate. For instance, if you're using Panopto of your institution, there is a way on how you can manage your recordings from Collaborate and transfer those to Panopto. Also, bulk downloading of recordings as well. So let me copy and paste all of these resources in the chat so that they can be preserved in the recording. A little bit tricky, to be honest with you. Multitasking, there we go. Hopefully they look kind of nice in the chat. Yes, they do. So again, some additional resources that we have available for you in the context of managing your storage, deleting recordings, downloading recordings, transferring recordings. All of these resources are available. So, okay, so now let's spend a little bit of time sharing best practices and some recommendations that you can adopt for you to not just manage your storage better, but also support your students and your faculty better as well. So since we are in the discussion of best practices and recommendations, let's spend some time sharing best practices to better manage your Collaborate storage. But to make things a bit more meaningful, I am also going to share with you some insights that will help you get some context as you go about managing your storage. Keep in mind that these are high-level numbers, so I encourage you to leverage the reports that we just reviewed earlier today to find insights specific to your institution. But, you know, just in the context, again, generally speaking, at a high level, let's talk some best practices. So, communicate with your faculty and staff leveraging Blackboard Collaborate this information. Around 35% of recordings never get played at all. So perhaps spending some time communicating with your faculty, communicating with those individuals who have the opportunity to create recordings, to only record relevant or appropriate live sessions. As far as also some of the best practices, and in the context of making sure that only appropriate sessions are recorded, develop and implement a recording retention policy as well. So going back to that, 35% of recordings that never get played, well, recordings are played in the first 35 days, and after that, the playback of those recordings is very minimal. And even after 60 days, it is actually close to zero. So having a retention policy at your institution that will help you facilitate effective cleanup tasks for the recordings is something that you probably need to consider because again, those recordings that are played even after 60 days, that playback is close to 0%. And then also be mindful of existing academic and institutional needs as you go. So the global number of recordings added back in 2020, April of 2020, was around 25 times the number of new recordings in January of 2020. So obviously this sort of makes sense because that's the time when we made that quick transition to remote instruction. But again, I may be pointing out the obvious here, but COVID continues to impact the recording storage usage. So you may want to think about an aggressive retention policy or a creative retention policy that it's going to find the right balance for your institution when you consider these numbers around playback times or the number of times recordings are played, but also the number of courses and your the number of courses being offered at your institution, but also your licensing allotments as well. So communicate and inform faculty and staff about appropriate recording opportunities. Not all synchronous sessions need to be recorded. And in some instances, only a portion of the live session may be what's needed to be recorded. So remember, only 35% of all the recordings, not only 35, but 35% of all recordings, they never get played. So again, this line in here is trying to provide you with some recommendations. So working with your instructional designers or your faculty working with your instructional designers to identify the opportunities or when it is appropriate to have synchronous sessions, and then not only that, but when to record those synchronous sessions. Develop and implement optimal recording retention policies. So maybe, any collaborate recordings that are created in the last academic year, they will be deleted the following year. And if you, faculty member, feel the need that there is a great recording that you want to preserve, let's work with you as part of this workflow, as part of this policy, to make sure that we retain that intellectual property rather than us, meaning the team supporting Collaborate at your institution, will arbitrarily delete that recording as well. So again, also consider other aspects and make your faculty aware of those additional details that they need to keep in mind, especially when creating recordings. Because some of these recordings, depending on how they develop, depending on what kind of information is shared, there may be some student privacy implications there as well. There also may be related to curriculum development. So perhaps a recording that is 4 years old and is outdated, it may not be appropriate to be used in the context of your course. So incorporate these collaborate recordings best practices also as part of your course maintenance or as part of your course design best practices as well, because they will go hand in hand. So again, this is where technology meets instructional design, and you will have the opportunity to factor all of these as you go about developing these best practices and putting in place guidelines or policies at your institution as well. Now, as far as supporting Blackboard Collaborate at the user level, I do want to spend some time just reviewing some of the resources we have available. And I recognize that some of these will sound familiar, but nevertheless, I think it is critical for me to share these. For instance, going back to 2020, and I'm not sure, are you able to hear me? I'm not sure if I'm losing connection in here because my lights at home just flickered. Can you hear me?
You're back on. You were off for about 4 seconds.
Okay. So
and now you're gone again.
Sorry about that, everyone. We'll just hold on for 1 second whilst Edgar rejoins. I can see he's popping in and out. If you can just bear with us a couple of minutes. Sorry about that. I think is continuing to have some issues. I think if we can just hold off for a couple of minutes. I can see there's some more questions that are coming into the chat, so please keep those coming in whilst my other colleagues can answer those. And I think we'll just wait a minute until Edgar can reconnect to his internet. Edgar, I can see that you're back. I'm just going to promote you.
Excellent. I am so sorry about that. Electricity and something went funky here, so apologies about that. So I'm not sure at what point I got disconnected, but my intention is to share with you some resources on how you can make your users aware of all the resources that they have at their disposal as part of these best practices and recommendations. So I recognize that some of these may sound redundant, but nevertheless, it's still important for me to share all of these. So Collaborate is a browser-based solution that uses the WebRTC protocol. It is important for me to remind you about this because it does not require any additional plugins or specific apps to access a Collaborate session. And actually, users can access a Collaborate session from any device. Now, with that said, I also want to remind you of certain details that we may already know, but are now more critical to ensure students and instructors have the best experience when leveraging Blackboard Collaborate. More so after going through the circumstances we experienced during the pandemic, that in some instances amplified that digital divide that exists across our diverse student population. And a clear example is me just dropping from this session. Electricity just went out for a little bit. I had to switch back to my hotspot rather quickly, but again, all of these circumstances that we will experience as we go about our daily educational experiences, if you will. So some of us may have the luxury of having a wired connection, but most of us don't. And instead, we rely on Wi-Fi, or in my case right now, on cellular data. So, and by the way, as you saw right now, transitioning from a Wi-Fi connection to a cellular data connection will drop you from the session and you will need to reconnect again. So side note there, given the circumstances that we just experienced right now. But whenever possible, let's use a wired connection. And I know that, that's a luxury to have today, especially when everybody's working from home or learning from home. So if, for instance, the local fast food parking lot is the only option that you have, then let's make sure that faculty and students are aware that while in a live session, perhaps they can close other programs that may be taking away from their experience, such as email clients, or from a student's point of view, closing those YouTube tabs in their web browser. Also keeping the web browsers up to date, or if you're using Collaborate or you're using your mobile device rather to access Collaborate, to make sure that you're using a supported mobile web browser as well. There are also other details from the faculty point of view, like those indicators, so that they can see how their students' connection is doing, and based on that, then make a call on whether or not to ask their students to turn on their cameras and leverage the gallery view, for instance. So again, all of these information that, given the circumstances that we experienced in 2020, we had to sort of go through all of that, even though we were aware of all of these. Now, there's a couple of resources, and I will mention this one several times for the remainder of this presentation, but we have, for instance, a home troubleshooting network tips. So that article that I just shared with you. And then in addition to that, and for instance, for those of you or those of us who use a Mac, every time that you update your operating system, there may need to be or you may need to go back and reset or set your system preference permissions again after a specific update. So again, all of these things that you may already know this, you may be aware, for instance, as this slide illustrates, all the network indicators, but it is important for us to make our faculty aware of all of these resources and all of these variables and how they may affect access to a session, more so after having gone through this pandemic. Now, from the student's point of view, just like with faculty, there are certain things that we'll need to take care of or to help have a positive experience when accessing Blackboard Collaborate. One of them, and specifically when you're having issues during a live session, timing is critical. So opening a support ticket may not necessarily be the best option, but we do have the opportunity to provide you with some just-in-time support through our Blackboard bot. I'll touch on that in just a little bit, but just reminding students to have that if whenever possible to leverage a reliable internet connection. If they're having audio issues or if they are moving away from a Wi-Fi connection into cellular data connection, just refreshing and accessing the session again, closing any programs or any other tabs that may be taking away from the bandwidth, like any YouTube tabs, or even just turning off the Wi-Fi on a cellular phone may increase the bandwidth for their laptop. So, little things like that. And again, just using a supported web browser, especially if they're accessing that from a mobile phone. Now, a little bit of information about this Blackboard chatbot. Back in 2020, we conducted a survey just to get a better feel on how institutions were supporting users, but also how users were, what the expectations were in the context of support. So through that survey, we identified the need for us to sort of step up and empower you, meaning your institution, but also your faculty and your students. And we offer this Blackboard bot. It is a free tool offered inside Blackboard Collaborate, and you can actually access that through the little gear, through the My Settings tab, and then right at the very bottom, you're going to see an option that says Chat Support. It is free of charge, and the great news is that there is no line or queue for this chatbot to provide just-in-time help for the faculty and for the student, especially when they're having issues right in the middle of a live session as well. Now, other resources that we have available, we do have one-pager cheat sheets, and let me paste this link in the chat to our community portal, where you can access these particular resources that you can share with faculty. Some of them focus on the specific functions or features within Blackboard Collaborate, such as where everything is located, the attendee panel, the My Settings, the chat, how to share content, how to start a recording. But then we also have some additional resources that will make your faculty aware of all the other steps, if you will, or the other checklists that they need to consider before the session, during the session, and after the session as well. So again, sharing that link in the chat to our community portal. And in addition to that link, I will also copy and paste this long list of resources. One of them I already shared, which is that networking troubleshooting. But again, nevertheless, very important resources that you can leverage as well. Whoa, that copy and paste didn't look so well in the chat. So let me try to paste the home networking troubleshooting guide, which is this one right here that I just posted. I also want to point your attention on this community developed Chrome extension developed by one of our clients, is the playback speed, which is critical for those students, for instance, that want to go through a recording rather quickly. This is a Chrome extension, and again, it was developed by one of our clients. So appreciate that, and I want to give credit to, unfortunately, I don't know who developed the name of that person, but I still want to take the time to recognize that contribution. So, all right, so we only have a few minutes left, so let me spend some time just sharing with you all these resources that we have available in the context of Blackboard Collaborate Original. So as you may know, After the December 31st of 2020, Collaborate original users are no longer able to create new sessions, start new sessions, or join existing sessions. So we have stop access to Blackboard Collaborate Original, but we do have some resources, and more specifically, the one that I want to highlight out of this particular slide is the one that will allow you to download all your legacy recordings. And I also want to highlight the deadline, which is July 1st of this year, before you have the opportunity to download all of these legacy recordings, okay? So I will aim to copy and paste these links in the chat. I'm not sure, yes, they posted rather nicely, so that's good. But again, I just want to make you aware of the deadline of July 1st, which is the time when you will no longer be able to download those recordings. So you still have a little bit of time to gather those recordings if you desire to do so. And I know that today's conversation, it was more about storage, but nevertheless, it is always important for me to share this information related to Collaborate Original. So with that, I want to also recommend to you that you can access all of these resources, and it's a link that I shared earlier in the presentation. You can access all of these resources through our community portal. Let me get that link again. So the copy of the slides and all these documents that I'm referencing, you can access through that link. So with that, I'm going to pause here. I've reached the end of the presentation, and I am going to ask my colleagues to see if there are any questions that we need to address verbally.
Thanks, Edgar. I can see that there were a couple of questions. Well, there's quite a few questions coming through the chat, and I can see our colleagues have been answering them as we go through. I am going to invite them, if there's anything of particular importance that anybody wants to reiterate. Does anybody from Blackboard want to take a mic and just to kind of repeat an answer that you think would be beneficial for everybody to hear? No? Okay, no problem.
So I did not necessarily keep track of all the chat, but I do see Kathy's question there. So Kathy, that's one of the things that we are going to address through the bulk transferring and bulk deletion as well, coming later this calendar year. So yeah. Glenn, I'm not sure I understand your archive request. Okay. All right, Stephanie, you did, so thank you for answering that. So Sean, the usage report, you're talking about storage. Yes, that's going to be later available this calendar year, but you do have a way to get that, or you should be able to get that every month from your account team at Blackboard. So Eva, I see your question there. There are several ways on how you can act on deleting those recordings from courses that have been deleted. One could be through our API. I'll make reference again what I shared with Kathy earlier, that through that recording report, and I'm not sure of all the details on how this is going to work, but you will have the opportunity also to flag recordings from that recording report for bulk deletion as well. And again, using those data points the data points that I just mentioned, the recording report, like the session name, session ID, and the creator, and when you cross-reference that with the date, the last time the recording was accessed and all of that, so hopefully that will give you a good opportunity to determine whether or not a recording is a good candidate for deletion. I want to circle back to Glenn's question related to archive requests for videos. Since you made reference to Learn courses, Glenn, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. There are no archives in the same way that we have for Learn courses. So we're talking about recordings in here. And if you want to preserve those recordings, again, you have the opportunity to leverage some of the resources that we shared in one of the slides about transferring recordings. And again, I may sound repetitive here, but we will have that functionality to do bulk transfers as well later this calendar year as part of our roadmap. Glenn, I'm gonna take a stab at it. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Jeff.
Edgar, I did just want to bring you back up to the question from OM Sunay about which is the most accurate number to report total numbers of collab sessions conducted in a day. I don't know if you know the answer to that or if anybody else from Blackboard would be able to answer that directly.
That's that's a good question. Oh, I don't know. Blackboard colleagues, I'm not sure which would be the most accurate number. And let me read it verbally here. So which is the more accurate number to report total number of collab sessions conducted in a day? Either the session instances launched in a metrics report or the session instance identifier in the attendance report. So thank you, John, for that answer, and hopefully that provides some clarity. I see we have only a couple of minutes, so I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer, but before we reach the top of the hour, I want to thank you all for your time. Apologies for the technology inconvenience there. Perfect timing actually on me illustrating how if you have to switch from Wi-Fi connection to your hotspot, what happens. Anyways, thank you again for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Edgar. It's almost like you planned it. It worked perfectly. I do just want to repaste the community site URL. As I say, all the recordings and the slides will be posted there. There is also a discussion area as well. So I was thinking maybe for those of you that are on Moodle, this would be a good point to start a discussion to help each other out. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and we will send the recording out to you soon. Take care and thank you.